My name is Audrey. I'm 30, a single mom. And for most of my life, I've trained myself to tolerate pain, the kind of pain that doesn't leave bruises but digs under your skin, reshapes your spine, makes you question your own worth every single day. But nothing, not years of therapy, not 2 semesters in communication school, not even the betrayal of my ex-husband prepared me for the day my older brother Derek slapped my 6-year-old daughter across the face at a family reunion. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a disciplinary moment taken too far. It was punishment delivered with precision and a smile in front of nearly 24 relatives. And worse, my father smirked and muttered. She needed to learn some shame. My mother laughed and lifted her glass of Chardonnay, as if they were toasting a lesson well taught. Let that sit for a second. Now, before I take you through the storm that followed, and trust me, there was a storm, I want to say something directly. If you've ever been dismissed by your family, gaslit into silence, or punished for protecting your child, you are not alone. This is for you, and if you're still watching, hit subscribe, leave a comment, and buckle in, because by the end of this story, the Thompson family will never be the same. Let's rewind. 6 days earlier, I was standing in our small 2-bedroom apartment in Madison, folding Lily's favorite blue sundress, the one with the yellow butterflies, when she asked, "Are we really going to Grandpa's lake house, Mommy?" Her eyes were wide, sparkling with the innocent kind of excitement only a 6-year-old can summon for a family reunion. And all I could think was, how do I protect her from something she doesn't even know exists? You see, I grew up in that lake house. Cedar walls, private dock, wine cellar stocked with enough Merlot to drown a village, and emotional landmines in every corner. My father, Howard Thompson, is a powerhouse attorney who believes empathy is a liability. My mother, Eleanor, is elegance coated in ice silk blouses, fixed smiles, and casual cruelty delivered in the tone of a compliment. And Derek, the golden boy, 2 years older than me, everything I wasn't. Growing up, Derek could crash the car, lie to our teachers, or skip Thanksgiving and still be met with applause. I once got grounded for crying too loud during a storm. My mother said I was manipulating with emotion. I was 8. I didn't fight back. I adapted. I became quiet, efficient, agreeable. The family joke was that Audrey always had so much potential, if only she wasn't so dramatic. No one ever asked why I cried, or why I left the room when they started praising Derek like he was the second coming of Christ with an MBA. At 16, I learned how to disappear in plain sight. Then came Jason. He was my escape plan. I met him freshman year of college. He was kind, warm, and he listened. Actually listened. We married too young. I know that now. At 24. I gave birth to Lily, a little girl with my dark hair, her dad's blue eyes, and a heart 10 times the size of either. I promised myself she'd never feel what I felt growing up. Of course, promises like that are made of hope, not certainty. By the time Lily turned 4, Jason had moved out, an affair with a coworker named Kara. 6 months. He claimed it was a mistake. We tried counseling, but his apology was more about guilt than love. I walked, alone, dignified, determined. And for a while, we were okay. Tight budget, tight space. But Lily and I made a home out of mismatched chairs, Tuesday night pancakes, and a shared playlist of Disney songs and Nina Simone. She called our apartment the Butterfly House because she said it made her feel light. Then the invitation came. The Thompson family reunion. 3 days. Lake Michigan. All expenses covered. Let's rebuild. My mother had texted, "Lily deserves to know her roots." At first, I ignored it. Then Lily came home from school with a drawing our family. "But only the 2 of us," she asked. "Why don't I have cousins like Emma or Jack from class?" My heart cracked. I thought maybe they had changed. Maybe my parents were old enough to recognize the damage. And maybe I was foolish enough to believe that giving them a second chance wouldn't cost my daughter her light. Spoiler, I was wrong. We arrived Friday afternoon. The lake house stood as imposing as I remembered: gray stone columns, tall glass windows, and the smell of old money and unresolved trauma. I pulled into the driveway behind Derek's Tesla. My father's Mercedes was already parked under the portico. Lily bounced in the back seat. "Can I go swim right away?" "We'll say hello first," I said, my smile a carefully stitched mask. Inside, the house buzzed. Caterers in black aprons carried trays of crab cakes. Kids ran through the halls screaming with joy. My father stood near the fireplace with his usual glass of scotch, gesturing at a portrait of Derek like it was the Mona Lisa. My mother appeared at the door, perfectly pressed as always. "Traffic?" she asked, embracing me stiffly. Lily got a warmer smile. "There's my little butterfly." That's when Paul, my uncle by marriage, married to Dad's sister Linda, approached with a camera rig. He grinned. "Don't mind me, I'm filming a legacy documentary. Wireless mics in all common areas. Howard's idea. Preserve the Thompson greatness or something." I laughed, the kind of laugh that has razor blades in it. Little did they know, those mics would be their downfall. Derek emerged from the kitchen with his wife, Natalie. He looked me over like I was an old trophy someone forgot to polish. Still at that, what is it, marketing assistant job? "Administrative coordinator." I corrected, "I just got promoted." He smirked. "Cute. I just closed a 7-figure deal. Anderson Tech." Dad clapped him on the back. "That's my boy." And just like that, I was invisible again. Later that night, after dinner, where Derek's every sentence was a resume and mine were mostly ignored, I tucked Lily into the smallest room in the house, far from the lake view. She was quiet. "Everything okay, baby?" She hesitated. "Cousin Emma said I sing too loud, and Uncle Derek told me girls who talk a lot don't get liked." I felt my jaw tighten. The room blurred around the edges. I took a breath, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "Your voice is beautiful. You don't need to shrink to make others comfortable." She smiled, but I saw the doubt. That night, I lay awake listening to the sounds of laughter downstairs. My mother's laugh, my father's glass clinking, Derek's booming voice. And for the first time in years, I felt rage bubble beneath the layers of politeness I'd spent my life perfecting. But I still didn't see it coming. Not the slap, not the silence, not the crack that would finally split the Thompson family apart. That happened the next morning. And trust me, it's a story worth hearing. The sun poured through the gauzy curtains of our cramped guest room, washing everything in gold. I blinked against the light, disoriented for a second, before remembering where we were: the Thompson Lake House, the place where I used to silently count how many hours were left until I could go back to college dorm rooms, cheap instant noodles, and freedom. Only this time, I had Lily, and I had promised myself she wouldn't be hurt the way I had been. She was humming as she slipped into her blue sundress with yellow butterflies, her small fingers carefully brushing imaginary dust off the hem. "Uncle Paul said there's waffles in the big room," she said, bouncing at the edge of the bed. I checked my phone, 8:17 a.m., a little too early for forced civility and casual family jabs, but I smiled anyway. "Let's go. Love, I hear these waffles are legendary." I didn't have the heart to tell her that the only thing legendary in this family was our capacity to wound each other with a smile. The big room, as Lily called it, was my mother's architectural trophy: vaulted ceilings, wall-to-wall windows overlooking Lake Michigan, and acoustics so crisp they caught even whispered judgments. As we entered, I immediately spotted the hierarchy in motion: my father seated at the head of the oak table with his usual posture of authority, my mother overseeing the buffet with the calculated elegance of someone who had once managed a political fundraiser. Derek was already seated, in the middle of a half-brag about some investment portfolio. Natalie sat beside him, her eyes neutral but distant, like someone watching a rerun they'd seen too many times. The cousins were in a cluster: Emma, Jack, and two others whose names I always forgot, all clean-pressed and curated. Lily hovered beside me, visibly trying to decode the social script. I guided her to the end of the table and handed her a plate. Breakfast went the way these things always did. Derek spoke. Others nodded. Howard asked a question. Derek answered like it was a TED Talk. Someone tried to compliment me on Lily's curls, only for my mother to interject. Yes, Audrey always had uncontrollable hair too. Took years to tame. I bit my tongue and buttered Lily's waffle. She didn't seem to notice, too busy arranging her fruit into a flower. But then Emma whispered something. I didn't hear it, but I saw Lily's face shift. Her shoulders dropped slightly. Her hand froze midair. A few seconds later, Lily tried to join in their laughter with a silly joke, something about waffles flying, and was met with tight-lipped silence. A familiar burn rose in my chest. It was happening again. The social exile. The polite shunning. This time to my daughter. I leaned over. You okay, honey? She nodded quickly, but wouldn't meet my eyes. Then she stood up and walked over to where my father stood by the coffee machine, chatting with Robert, my uncle. I saw her say something, her face earnest, hopeful, and I saw his face twist, something sharp and disgusted flickering across it before he turned away. Lily came back and sat down quietly. He said I was interrupting grown-ups. She whispered, and that kids should only speak when asked. My stomach turned. I reached for my daughter's hand, but she was already focused on pushing blueberries into her syrup, trying to pretend it didn't matter. Later that morning, Lily asked if she could sing a song for everyone. I practiced it for the school talent show. She beamed. I want Grandma and Grandpa to hear it. My throat tightened, but I nodded. Of course. Sweetie. Maybe after lunch, we found a moment between courses. The adults were lingering with drinks. The cousins distracted. Lily stood at the center of the great room. Chin up, hands clasped. She began singing a sweet, off-pitch rendition of Somewhere Over the Rainbow. It wasn't perfect, but it was pure. Her voice cracked slightly on a high note. I held my breath. And then I heard Derek's chuckle, not amused, dismissive. A low, sharp scoff that cut through the room. Jesus. Audrey, you letting her embarrass herself like that? My blood froze. Lily faltered mid-note. Her face flushed pink. She turned to me in confusion. I stood up. Derek, she's 6. Sit down and shut up. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The silence that followed was louder than any shout. But then he stood up too, walked toward Lily. Hey, kid, he said, crouching to her eye level. Girls who make noise like that, they get laughed at. Maybe try being a little quieter next time. And then without warning, he reached out and slapped her across the cheek. It was fast, audacious, brutal in its arrogance. A reflex, no. It was deliberate. I rushed forward, grabbing Lily, who had started crying. One hand pressed against her face. I could hear my pulse in my ears. I turned toward my father. He sipped his coffee and said, without looking at me, well, she needed to learn some shame sometime. My mother offered a lazy shrug. Tone builds character, she muttered. Derek didn't apologize. He didn't even flinch. It was Natalie who broke the silence. Derek, she said softly, you hit a child. But even she didn't move. She didn't stand between us. She didn't touch Lily. She didn't help. I clutched my daughter, trembling. We're leaving, I said through clenched teeth. Now. My mother sighed, always making things dramatic. My father didn't even look up. Derek was already turning back to the conversation. It was like we were a scene that had ended, and the next act had already begun. But they had forgotten something they had put in place themselves, thinking it would serve them. Paul, the camera, the wireless microphones in every common area. The entire house wired for the Thompson family legacy documentary. And I had seen Paul earlier that morning adjusting the mic near the fireplace, near where Derek stood, where Howard sipped, where Eleanor laughed, and for the first time that weekend. I smiled. I didn't pack. I didn't say goodbye. I carried Lily out the front door, into the summer sun, her small hand gripping mine like a lifeline. She didn't ask questions. She didn't cry. She just whispered, "Can we go home now?" And I nodded, opening the car door. Yes, baby, we're going home. But home wasn't going to be the same, because something had broken in me, something sacred, and for once, I wasn't going to sweep it under the rug or wrap it in excuses. I was done being the quiet one. I was done letting them shape the story. What they didn't know was that Paul had seen everything, and Paul, unlike the rest of them, wasn't loyal to blood. He was loyal to truth, and in the days that followed, that truth would become a weapon they never saw coming, a truth that would make them wish they had simply apologized, a truth that would drag their perfect legacy into the daylight and let the world see exactly who they really were. But first, I had to make a call, and I knew exactly who to dial. The drive back from the lake house was quiet, eerily so. Lily fell asleep halfway home, her head leaning against the window, her cheeks still faintly red where Derek had struck her. I kept glancing at her in the rearview mirror, trying to steady my breathing. My hands clenched the steering wheel tighter than necessary. Every time I replayed the moment, every word, every indifferent glance, every sip of coffee my father took after watching his granddaughter get assaulted, a fresh wave of disbelief and anger surged through me. I felt a kind of rage I didn't know I was capable of, not just as a daughter who had endured years of subtle humiliation, but now as a mother whose child had been publicly hurt and humiliated with complete impunity. And all I could think was, they really thought I would stay quiet. Again. When we pulled into our apartment parking lot, Tara, my best friend and neighbor, was already waiting at the front steps. I hadn't said much in my last text. Just 5 words. We're back. It was bad. She took one look at Lily, and her eyes darkened. What the hell happened? I told her everything. From the breakfast humiliation to the slap. From my father's indifference to my mother's blasé sip of wine, as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. I told her about the camera setup, the microphones, the entire legacy documentary Paul had been filming like a fly on the wall. Tara listened in silence, arms crossed, jaw clenched. Then she said, what I hadn't yet allowed myself to admit. You need to burn that whole toxic dynasty down. I nodded, not because it was dramatic, not because I wanted revenge, but because for the first time, I realized I had leverage, real leverage. Not vague accusations or emotional testimony, but cold, hard, video-recorded proof, unedited, unscripted, and damning, and I knew exactly how to use it. The next morning, after dropping Lily off at school and ensuring her teacher kept a close eye on her for any emotional signs of trauma, I drove straight to Paul's production office. It was a modest place above a used bookstore, lined with film posters and empty coffee cups. He opened the door, looking sheepish. "Audrey," he said cautiously, "I was going to call. I saw the playback from yesterday. I'm sorry." I sat down across from him. "I don't need apologies, Paul. I need access." To his credit, he didn't flinch. He slid a USB drive across the table. "This has everything." 3 days worth of raw footage. Audio from the breakfast area. The great room. The kitchen. That entire scene with Derek and Lily crystal clear. Multiple angles. And before you ask, yes. I backed it up on 3 other drives. I'm not stupid. For a brief second, I felt something unfamiliar hope. I took the drive home, locked the door, and started watching. For hours. I sat at my laptop in stunned silence as the Thompson family slowly unraveled on screen. There was my mother, telling Natalie she shouldn't worry so much about Audrey's parenting. It's not like Lily's going to Harvard. My father, drunkenly declaring after dinner, Lily's too soft, just like her mother, no backbone, and Derek, casually bragging to his cousins. A little slap never killed anyone. I'm doing the kid a favor builds grit. The worst part wasn't just the words. It was how comfortable they were saying them, how normalized their cruelty had become, how absolutely certain they were that there would be no consequences. That's what lit the fuse. Over the next 3 days, I built a plan. It wasn't enough to post the footage online. I wanted impact, not chaos. I wanted consequences that stuck. I met with a lawyer someone Tara recommended who specialized in family law and child advocacy. Her name was Morgan Diaz. And from the first moment, I knew she wasn't afraid to go after people with money and connections. I showed her the footage. She didn't interrupt once. When the final slap echoed through the laptop speakers, she leaned back and said, "We're going to file for assault on a minor, emotional abuse, and if you're willing, a full protective order against Derek. We'll also report to CPS to flag this incident as part of a pattern of familial neglect." I nodded. Do it all. But the legal route was just the beginning. I knew how my family operated. They didn't fear the law. They feared public shame, reputational collapse. So I called Paul again and asked if he'd be willing to make a separate edit, a cut, that highlighted the culture of cruelty inside the Thompson family. I don't need music. Don't make it artsy. I told him. I want the world to see it raw. He agreed, quietly, almost reverently. "What are you planning to do with it?" he asked. "Send it to every client on Derek's investment list," I said. "Email it to the local news station under a burner account. Let it go viral on its own. I'll never even need to attach my name." Tara helped me build a private Google Drive link, complete with anonymous download access. We embedded metadata, stripped identifiers, then created a curated mailing list, Derek's firm partners, their HR department, even a few journalists who had once interviewed my father about ethics and litigation. The video began with a black screen and a simple title, "Inside the Legacy of Family Unmasked." By the 4th day, everything was in place. But I still had one more move. Natalie. She had always been strangely distant, never quite in lockstep with the rest of the family, and I had a gut feeling she'd been biting her tongue for years. I sent her a message. "I don't blame you, but you saw what happened. If you want to help Lily, help me." She called me that night, her voice quiet. I never thought he'd do it in front of everyone. She said, "He's done things before. I thought I could control it. I was wrong. That confession cracked something open." "Would you testify?" I asked. There was a pause. "If it means protecting Lily, yes." And just like that, the foundation of their kingdom began to crumble. But I wasn't done yet. Because what none of them knew, what even Paul hadn't realized, is that the camera had also captured something else, something no one had intended to record. A conversation late at night between my father and one of his colleagues. He was bragging about pushing an unethical merger through a few years back. It wasn't explicit, but it was suggestive enough to be taken seriously if released to the right regulatory body. And suddenly, I had a backup plan. I backed up everything, triple encrypted, stored on 3 separate cloud drives, and then I waited. 3 days later, it began. Emails trickled in. First, a panicked message from my cousin asking, "Did you see this video going around?" Then Paul called. "Someone leaked the cut. It's spreading fast." I pretended to be surprised. No idea. Maybe the truth wanted to be seen. Within 24 hours, the firm Derek worked for released a statement that he had been placed on administrative leave pending internal review. The Child Advocacy Office followed up to confirm they had begun investigating the incident. And my parents, well, they went dark. No calls, no texts, just silence. For the first time in my life, their silence felt like music. And as I sat on my couch that night, Lily asleep beside me, her breathing soft and even, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Power. Not vengeance. Not cruelty. Just power, the quiet kind that comes from finally standing your ground after a lifetime of being told to sit down. But this wasn't the end. Not yet. There was still the matter of court, the final confrontation, and the message I wanted to leave etched into their legacy forever. And for that, I had one final move. By the time the Thompson name started trending on local forums and employee group chats, I had already filed the necessary paperwork. Morgan moved fast. She drafted and submitted the protective order against Derek within 24 hours of the video leak. The footage was damning, the timing perfect, but I didn't stop there. With Natalie's written testimony confirming a pattern of physical intimidation in their home, including 2 separate incidents where she had witnessed Derek yelling inches from Lily's face during previous visits, Morgan added a formal request for supervised visitation and a full psychological assessment of Derek's behavior around minors. It wasn't just about what had happened in front of the camera. It was about showing a system of harm, a pattern of entitlement, masked as parenting, of emotional abuse, framed as discipline. I didn't think they'd respond, but I underestimated just how much my parents feared scandal more than accountability. Within a week of filing, I received an official notice that Howard Thompson, my father, had retained counsel to seek a resolution outside of court. Translation, they were scared enough to consider paying for silence. I met their offer with a hard pass. I wasn't doing this for money, I was doing it for Lily, for myself, for the younger version of me who once cried quietly on the stairs while everyone laughed at Derek's jokes after he'd shoved me into the fireplace and called it roughhousing. That girl deserved justice too. Not just closure, not a handshake behind closed doors. Justice. Meanwhile, Paul's video had made its way into the inbox of a journalist named Vanessa Duquesne, a local reporter known for exposing toxic corporate cultures. She reached out cautiously, asking if I'd be willing to speak anonymously for a broader expose on legacy families and internal abuse. I agreed, with conditions. I wouldn't be named, and Lily wouldn't be shown. But I'd give her all the audio, all the footage, and Natalie's corroboration. The interview was quiet, off record, deeply personal. I told her everything, not just the slap, not just the laugh, but the way it had felt to be erased, minimized, dismissed again and again by the people who were supposed to love me. She didn't take notes. She just listened. When I finished, she said softly, "They didn't just hit Lily. They broke the part of you that was still hoping for redemption." The article went live 3 days later. Inside the House of Silence, the legacy that protected everything except its children. It was damning, precise, brutal without being sensational. And it made the rounds faster than I expected. The law firm my father had worked for, Thompson, Reeves and Blackstone, announced he would be taking a permanent leave of absence due to family matters. Derek's tech firm released a brief memo stating he was no longer affiliated with their brand due to misalignment in values. But the part that struck deepest came from inside the family itself. My Aunt Linda, Paul's wife, my dad's sister, called me late one night. Her voice was shaking. "Audrey, I didn't know. I suspected things, but I never thought it would go this far. I'm sorry." I didn't say anything at first. What could I say that I forgave her, that it was okay? It wasn't okay, but I didn't want vengeance against everyone, just accountability from the ones who built this cage and forced everyone to smile inside it. I told her, "If you truly mean that, then say it publicly." She paused, then whispered, "I will." The next morning, Linda shared Vanessa's article on her social media. She wrote a single sentence I should have protected her and Lily. "I'm sorry I didn't." That small act, that public admission, cracked the foundation further than any legal blow ever could, because it came from within. A voice once loyal to the family finally choosing truth over loyalty. At the same time, Morgan advised that we push ahead with a mediated court appearance. Not a trial, not yet, but a formal hearing where both parties could present their evidence in front of a family court judge. We set the date for the following Tuesday. I spent the night before going over every file, every clip. Paul gave me a final cut, a tight 7-minute reel showing Derek's slap, my father's remarks, my mother's nonchalance, and a handful of subtle but chilling moments from throughout the weekend. I didn't flinch watching it anymore. I just felt clarity, cold, hard, unflinching clarity. The courtroom wasn't grand, no oak-paneled walls or marble statues, just beige chairs, tired fluorescent lights, and the low hum of a fan in the corner. Derek arrived in a navy suit, hair gelled back, eyes defiant. His attorney sat beside him, a woman who looked vaguely uncomfortable from the moment she opened her laptop. My parents didn't show. Natalie did. She arrived 10 minutes early, sat next to me, and gave my hand a brief squeeze. "You're doing the right thing," she said. "I should have done it sooner." I wanted to hug her, but the room didn't allow for softness. The judge was a composed woman in her 50s who clearly didn't have patience for theatrics. She allowed Morgan to present the video first. The room was silent as the footage played. Even Derek's attorney didn't interrupt. When it ended, the judge glanced over her glasses and asked Derek, "Do you deny that this happened?" He hesitated. Then, incredibly, he said, "It was disciplinary. The child was being disruptive." The judge blinked once. "You struck a 6-year-old girl in front of multiple witnesses for singing." His lawyer cleared her throat. "Your Honor, Mr. Thompson would like to express..." The judge cut her off. "What he wants is irrelevant. I'm issuing an immediate no-contact order, pending full psychological evaluation. Any future visitation will be supervised, contingent on therapy compliance. Furthermore, this court will be referring the incident to Child Protective Services." Derek's face paled. Natalie exhaled. I felt my shoulders finally drop an inch. But what happened next surprised even me. The judge turned to me. "Ms. Thompson, do you have any final remarks for the record?" I stood. My hands weren't shaking. My voice didn't crack. "Yes, Your Honor, I'd like the court to recognize that this wasn't a one-time incident, not just with my daughter, with me, with others. There's a culture in that house that rewards cruelty and punishes empathy. I'm not asking for punishment. I'm asking for protection for my child, and for anyone else who might walk through those doors thinking they're safe." The judge nodded. "Duly noted." We exited the courthouse into the sunlight, blinking against the brightness. Natalie stayed behind for her own debrief. I walked to the parking lot with Paul, who'd come to offer moral support. "It's done," he said. I shook my head. "No, it's just beginning." Because the world had now seen the truth, and it was still talking. And I had one more message to deliver, not just to my family, but to every person who'd ever been told to shut up and sit down for the sake of peace. Because silence was no longer my inheritance, and neither was shame. The weeks after the hearing unfolded like a slow, deliberate unraveling of an empire, not with explosions or declarations, but with the quiet, irreversible shifting of power. I kept waiting for some dramatic final act from the Thompson family, a legal counterattack, a slander campaign, an anonymous smear on my parenting. But nothing came. No lawsuits, no emails, no veiled threats. What I got instead was silence, and in that silence, something began to heal. At first, it felt like standing in the ruins of something ancient and dangerous, unsure if it could rebuild into anything livable. But then, one morning, as I watched Lily belt out a completely off-key version of Let It Go while making pancakes, I realized we already were rebuilding. We were alive. We were laughing, and no one was telling her to be quiet anymore. The article kept circulating, finding new waves of attention as people discovered the footage, reshared Paul's documentary, or commented under Vanessa's exposé with stories of their own. A surprising number of messages flooded into my inbox from strangers, from other women, even from former colleagues of my father or Derek. Some apologized, some simply said thank you. But one message stopped me in my tracks. It was from Emma, the same cousin who had mocked Lily's singing at breakfast. She was 16. Her message was brief. I'm sorry. I didn't know how bad it was. I didn't know I was becoming like them. I don't want to be. That message hit harder than any threat ever could. I wrote her back, carefully. Knowing she was still inside that house, I told her the truth that breaking the cycle didn't start with grand gestures. It started with one voice refusing to stay silent. It started with choosing to listen, to believe someone else's pain even when you're told not to. I told her that bravery wasn't loud. Sometimes it was just deciding not to laugh when someone else is hurting. And I told her that if she ever needed somewhere safe, someone safe, she could find me. A week later, she sent me a voice memo singing the same song Lily had tried to sing at the lake house, softly, tenderly, and off-key. I cried, not because it was perfect, but because it was free. Meanwhile, Natalie filed for separation, quietly, without spectacle, just a clean break, citing emotional endangerment and psychological abuse. Paul helped connect her with a friend who ran a transitional housing network for professional women. She moved out with a single suitcase and took only what was legally hers. Her goodbye to Derek was reportedly one sentence: "If you ever try to contact me again, I'll bury you with your own footage." She's been sending Lily postcards since, cheerful ones, with hand-drawn birds and stickers. In one of them, she wrote, "Some of us learn too late what silence costs." I'm glad you didn't. It took me a few days to stop rereading that line. Derek, on the other hand, did exactly what I expected. He disappeared. Word got out that he tried applying for a job at a mid-tier finance firm out of state, but they declined after doing a background check and discovering reputational concerns. I don't know where he lives now. I don't care. The restraining order stands. He can't come within 500 feet of Lily, or contact me in any form. And that, honestly, is all the closure I need. My parents never reached out, not once, not even after everything came out. I sometimes wonder if they even read the article or watched the footage. Part of me imagines them holed up in that lake house, blaming each other for the collapse. Or worse, still convinced I overreacted. But another part of me, the quieter, less wounded part, knows it doesn't matter. They're not the judges of my story anymore. They don't hold the final word. I do. And that power, once terrifying, now feels natural. Lily started therapy. A warm, open woman named Carmen who specializes in trauma in young children. At first, Lily was hesitant, answering every question with a nod or a shrug. But after a few sessions, she started opening up. She even drew a picture one day of a dragon with two heads, one that yells, and one that drinks wine and says mean things with smiles. When Carmen asked her who the knight was, she drew a tiny stick figure with long hair and a purple cape. "That's Mommy," she said. I asked her later, "Why purple?" And she said, Because you always wear it when you feel strong. I hadn't even noticed. But she had. Tara, of course, stayed by our side through everything. She helped me navigate the interviews, the legal filings, even the dark days when I doubted whether any of it had been worth it. I once told her, during one of our late-night talks over lukewarm wine, I don't think I'll ever feel whole again. She didn't argue. She just said, maybe not. But you'll feel real. And that's better than pretending to be okay. She was right. And in the messy, real world we were now building, I found something better than peace. I found freedom. Paul released a final cut of the documentary, not the scandal tape, but a reframed story. It didn't feature the legacy or the power or the money. It was about one girl, a mother standing up when no one else would. He called it Unmuted. It was quietly beautiful. And no, it didn't go viral. It didn't need to. It reached exactly the people it was meant to reach. And that was enough. One afternoon, Lily and I were walking home from school when she suddenly asked, "Mommy, am I like you?" I stopped, crouched down, looked her in the eye. "What do you mean?" she said. "I mean, like strong, even when people are mean." I smiled. "You're not like me, Lily. You're better than me, because you were brave before I was." She seemed to think about that, then took my hand and said, "I want to help people, too. When I grow up," I whispered, "you already are." And maybe that's the true ending of this story, not the scandal, or the court case, or even the public fallout, but the quiet aftermath, where a child who was once told to shrink learns to expand. Again, where a woman who was taught to stay small finally takes up space. Where one voice, silence for too long, begins to echo. If you've made it this far into the story, thank you, not just for listening, but for seeing. If you've ever been dismissed, gaslit, belittled, or made to feel like your pain was a performance, know this, it wasn't. You were real. Your hurt was real. And you deserve to be believed. We all do. So if you're still carrying the weight of someone else's comfort, if you've been told to keep the peace at the cost of your own truth, consider this your permission to set it down. You don't owe anyone your silence, especially not the ones who mistook your kindness for permission. And if you're a parent, or an aunt, or just someone who loves a child, remember that your protection might be the only thing standing between that child and a lifetime of shame. Be loud. Be brave. Be willing to be the villain in someone else's story if it means being the hero in your own. Lily still sings, still loud, still off-key, but now, every time she does, I don't feel dread or fear. I feel joy, and the quiet pride of knowing that no matter how broken the house you came from was, you can still build a better one. Brick by brick, note by note, voice by voice. Because silence isn't peace. Silence is the cage. And we don't live in cages anymore.